Francois ventures into awakening. This channel is to record a synopsis of the events that have transpired thus far throughout my awakening. Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I decided to open this channel to document my awakening process as it is developing. Hopefully it can also help others that are experiencing a similar situations by letting them know that they are not alone. I am an older guy in my early 60s, and I would say that my first intuition about awakening started 3 years ago at the end of September 2021. I was a late YouTube user, and I only started using YouTube in around 2015. For the first few years, I only used YouTube to search for videos related to my professional job, such as computing various metrics and methods, coding, designing, and so on. Seeing all the other types of available videos while doing my typical search, I started to slowly watch videos on film trailers, science in general, astronomy, film reviews, politics, weather, archaeology, and others. Then, just by chance, in September 2021, I stumble upon a Sadhguru YouTube video titled, "I am not the body, I am not the mind." Normally I would have watched only the first few minutes of such video and moved on, but at that time I had problems with severe anxiety because I had all kind of crazy thoughts for no reason. In other words, I was suffering, as they say. I now finally realize that this video helped me to see or detect a small crack in my ego, which initiated my interests in spirituality and awakening. Although my interest was piqued, I rarely watched spiritual videos at that time, 2 or 3 times a month, so my awakening was only instigated at that time and started later. Then, about 10 months later, on July 29, 2022, I had a severe motorcycle accident causing 2 brain bleeds, or what the medical professionals refer to as traumatic brain injuries. I did not have a typical near-death experience, but I was absent from my body for almost 2 weeks. What I mean by absent is that my body was there, and functioning based on my family testimonies and interactions, but my consciousness was not. I have absolutely no recollection or memory of what happened the very day of the accident, including the accident itself, and the following 2 weeks. That time is a total blank for me. What I am going to recount for the accident and the following 2 weeks comes from the police reports and testimonies from my family, since I have absolutely no recollection of these events. According to the police report, on Friday, July 29th, at approximately 5 p.m., 5 witnesses testified that I was stopped and waiting for the green light at the intersection, like everyone else. When the light became green, I started moving forward, then a car on the crossing road burned its red light and hit my motorcycle. I apparently got thrown off my motorcycle and did a flip over the car to finally land motionless on the other side. The motorcycle was totaled, so it was a harsh hit. This happened at a very busy intersection with 2 lanes heading south, 2 lanes heading north and 3 lanes heading east and 3 lanes heading west, less than a mile from my home. Since it was on a Friday night in California, the traffic was extremely dense. I was starting to be very late to come back home with the dinner, so my wife tried to call me a few times. After 15 to 30 minutes of trying to reach me, my wife, who is handicapped and cannot drive, asked my daughter, who was luckily visiting us for the week, to see if she can find me around the sub shop where I went to get our dinner. Since the intersection of the accident was less than 1 mile from our house, it did not take long for my daughter to find that there was an accident at that busy intersection. She immediately recognized that the motorcycle on the side of the road was mine. She went to the police and asked them about the driver of the motorcycle. The police showed her my driver license photo, which my daughter immediately identified as being me. Since I was unconscious when the ambulance picked me up, the police could not tell her in what state I was and that she needed to go to the trauma center where the ambulance brought me. The police were conscious enough to remind my daughter to make sure to stay calm and to go slowly to the trauma center. At that point, my daughter must have been understandably under great stress. She took the time to call her brother, who lives in another state, and explain to him the situation and tell him to call their mother to let her know she was on her way to the trauma center. Her brother was able to first call the trauma center where I was brought and at least be able to learn that I was still alive in intensive care undergoing a bunch of tests. He then gave their mother a call to let her know how things were going. By the time my daughter made it to the trauma center and finally found me, an hour or so must have passed since the accident itself. She found me in a small intensive care room and the doctor was trying to ask me general questions that they typically asks to patient with this kind of injury. They had me registered as a John Doe and had already examined me through X-rays and CAT scan. The only thing they had found was these 2 brain bleeds, one on the surface of the brain and the second deep inside, and luckily the blood did not seem to pool anywhere in the brain, which would have been a big problem. So, when my daughter walked in the room, they were asking me their standard questions to continue to evaluate my state, but I was totally unresponsive. As soon as my daughter walked in, she grabbed my hand and said hi and asked me how I was in French, my native language, and I immediately squeezed her hand. When the doctor saw the reaction I had, the doctor asked my daughter if she could ask their standard questions in French. She did and I apparently answer most of them correctly. The doctor mentioned that it is normal that a person revert to their native language with this type of trauma. With those results, the doctor told my daughter that it would take time, but I should be able to do a full recovery, which I eventually did. Late that night my daughter finally went back home for sleep, but my wife was not too happy that she did not stay and spent the night at the hospital. The next day, my daughter went back to see me at the hospital, and they were doing more CAT scan to make sure there was no pooling of the blood happening anywhere in the brain. Towards the end of the day, the doctor said to my daughter that the hospital intensive care unit is presently very crowded, and they would really need to use the room. So, he asked my daughter if she could bring me home, since they cannot really do anything for me. The doctor was still very convinced that I would do a full recovery. Note that I am a 200 pounds individual that could not fully stand up straight at that point. So, a couple of nurses helped my daughter to load me in the car. The problem is when we arrived home, I could barely stand up and could not walk. Luckily, my wife has an electric scooter that she uses to get around when she is going out, so using that my daughter and wife were able to drag me from the car to the electric scooter, and once on the scooter, they drove me inside the house in front of our bedroom and then were able to drag me from the scooter to bed directly. My wife and daughter described to me that the first 2 to 3 days I was really like a baby. I could not walk anywhere, I could not even drink directly from a glass because I kept choking when trying to swallow. My wife gave me wet towel that I could suck on to make me drink and I did not eat anything. It seems like my body had to rewired himself to relearn these basic skills, such as equilibrium to stand up and walk, all kind of motor control, including swallowing and eye coordination. My wife mentioned that for at least the first day, I did not really open my eyes, and the few times I did, she could see that the eyes were moving all around independently without focusing on any specific object. I believe that this relearning of basic skills by the brain is what doctors refer to as neuroplasticity. As I previously mentioned, I do not recall experiencing any of the events from the day of the accident and the following 2 weeks. That time is a complete blank to me. What I vividly remember is when I came back, the overwhelming surge of feelings and thoughts that I had when my consciousness rejoined my body. It is impossible for me to convey the magnitude and intensity of what it really felt like. My body was watching TV in our living room while eating pre-cut watermelon, and I do remember clearly having a piece of watermelon on the fork in my hand and be about to eat it and immediately saying to myself, "Wow, this is great, I could be doing this for the rest of my life." Meaning sitting down, eat something and watch TV. As I said, too many thoughts came at once for me to describe them here, but one thought I clearly remember is that I knew or felt that I had been offline or away from my body for a while, not knowing how or why. It felt like when you wake up in the morning, except I had this profound knowing that it lasted much more than a night. I could hear my wife in the living room typing on her computer and my daughter talking on the phone upstairs on the second floor. I finally got up off my chair and went to see my wife to simply say hi since I did not see her in a long time. She simply replied by asking me if I needed something. I quickly realized that my wife saw me as normal. In other words, no one noticed or realized that my consciousness has not been there for 2 weeks. At that point, I simply went back to continue eating and watching TV. It is only later in the day, when I heard my wife and daughter talking about the accident, that I started asking questions about what happened exactly, and they showed me the police report. Then I slowly realized that the accident had happened a couple of weeks ago, so I started asking questions about those 2 weeks. I also learned that my son who lives out of state came out and spent most of these 2 weeks at our house to help. He had just left the morning before to go back to his house, yet I have absolutely no recollection at all that he was at home with us. The only behavioral difference that my wife noticed during these 2 weeks is that I was not talkative. I would simply answer questions when someone asked questions, but I did not myself ask any question or engage or participate in any conversation, which seemed quite typical to them for someone in my condition. This phenomena of the body being alone and acting in automatic mode or autopilot is something that I will address in more details in a future video. To conclude this video, after the accident, I had over 2 months of physiotherapy. From a medical perspective, I fully recovered from the accident, but it did leave me with some aftereffects that, in my opinion, have significantly altered who I am. Physically, the main aftereffects that I have is the fact that to this day both my shoulders still hurts and have limited force and range. Note that they have continuously slowly improved in the last 2 years since the accident and are still slowly improving with time. After the accident I could barely move my shoulders 50% of their normal range and lift anything. Nowadays I would say I can move my shoulders about 95% of their normal range and I can lift a 40-pound bag, which is not a lot for me, but at least it is in the right direction. Psychologically, the accident made me really understand what Sadhguru meant by, "I am not the body, I am not the mind." That video title was really demonstrated to me by the 2 weeks that my consciousness was separated from my body. It is a very interesting phenomena that directed me to pursue my awakening and is indirectly responsible for me getting the desire to create this new channel. Thank you for watching this video until the end, and as every YouTuber says, please click the like button and subscribe to my new channel if you find this video interesting. See you next time.